That sounds right.
Okay. So let's start from there. We've been discussing this interesting and complicated case of bar, right? Bar, obviously, the seemingly obvious explanation is that the animal falls into it and gets hurt. But as we saw yesterday and have discussed throughout the Masechta, in fact, that's not so simple. And there's a whole difference about whether animals get injured when they're underground because the air, something about whether it's noxious chemicals or it's the way it breathes or panic or something else that contributes to the damage that happens to the animal. We called it havla, right? The hevel, which means the air, I guess. So Shmuel said both things are possible. Rav said really that's the main one that causes a bar to cause a problem. So says the Gemara now today, it's none. Mishnah said, let's say your bar, is less than 10 tvachim. And 10 tvachim is the size that we determine is appropriate to kill an animal in a bar. Your bar is less than that. But the animal died nonetheless, mate. You're patur. Because it's presumably not your fault. Either the animal had some other illness or there was some other unexplained factor. But if it gets damaged, you are chayav because the animal can get damaged even if it's less than 10 tvachim. That's the assumption of the Mishnah. Continues the Mishnah, sorry. Sorry, where am I? Yeah. If a shar v'chamar falls into it and it's your mate, your putter, that's a quote, my taima, it must be, and this seems to go according to Shmuel, that the reason that you're chayiv in a bar is because of the force of the animal hitting the bottom. And if it's not 10 tvachim, it's not so much force because there's a principle of gravity, right? And the deeper it is, the more the force is. And so you must be putter. So it seems to go like Shmuel. So no, it means that there's no hevel. Now, what does it mean there's no hevel? There is. But it means there's not enough of this bad air inside the bar to damage an animal. Ask Mar if that's true. How come it says if you damage your chayav, if there's no hevel? Remember, if the issue is physical damage, then I understand. If it falls 10 tvachim, it will die. If it falls 9 tvachim, it'll break its leg. But if the issue is not physical damage, it's not non-physical, but it's the air, then either the air is a problem or the air is not a problem. If the air is not a problem at 10 tvachim, how could it get damaged from that air at 9 tvachim? And it's obviously not so simple. Amri ein havla the mita v'ish havla the nizakim. It could very well be that the air causes animal to suffer in a way that would damage it, but not in a way that would cause it to die. So you'd be chayav for that. A
corn translates hevel as fumes.
Fumes, yeah. That's again, but it's really not clear what fumes. Some say carbon dioxide, but it's not really clear. Why if you dig a hole in the ground, you're going to have a lot of fumes.
Also, did they know that carbon dioxide?
No, but they knew that there were fumes. I mean, they knew that it was unhealthy. We're going to see later, actually, we might not get there today because I'm not feeling so well, but we're going to see later that there's a general principle that if your bar is as wide as it's deep, you're not chayav for it because there's no fumes then, right? Because it's so wide that the fumes are diffuse. And so we're going to have a big debate about what if it's the exact same width and depth. But there's clearly in that concept of fumes, and of course in that case you'd be putter if it was very wide. So there was a concept that a narrow space in the ground is very toxic for breathing and for damage to the animal. Anyways, continues the Gemara. You're at the last wide line of Daf Nun Amud Bet. There was a shar. Tura means a shar. What's it called? A cow that fell into the arita de dalai. Arita de dalai is the row that you dig to dig water, get water out, the trench that you would dig for water. And the trench was how deep, Rosa?
9 tvachim.
6 tvachim. You would have no way of knowing that. They would dig a trench around their fields that was 6 tvachim, and you would use that to obviously put water in, you would irrigate, and your cow walked and fell into that ditch. You got nervous that your cow was going to be damaged, and the owner came and shechted it, shechte mari. The owner slaughtered it in the ditch, and then dragged it out. And the water probably got pretty dirty, but nonetheless, you shechted it. We're assuming there's no water in the ditch, by the way. You shechted it. Tarfei Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman said, oh, you can't eat that animal because it's probably a treifa. Because it probably got damaged when it fell into the ditch and therefore was going to die, even though it looks fine. And it's a treifa. Amr Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman said, Ishaka Mare Dahaitura, Kaba de Kimcha, right? If the owner of this shar had taken a little bit of kemach, right? Meaning Rashi understands it means would drag it out with kemach because it would make it come out because it wants to get the food. the azal, right? And it had gone, then he would have been okay. But the fact that he didn't is why it is a treifa, because Tana B'Ei Midrash, because we learned im shata me'eit la'eit kshera. If you let your shar after it falls live for 24 hours and nothing bad seems to have happened to it, and then you shecht it, you can assume it's okay. But the fact that you shechted it right away, you lost your chance, right? Lo afsed de l'tura, right? I would not have made his shar be lost. Shava Kamma kabi. It's worth many kav of grain. So because this guy was too cheap, basically, to feed his shar some grain and bring it out and let it live for 24 hours, he rushed to shecht it. I therefore have to passel the whole thing. Sorry. So that is the psak of Rav Nachman. Alma kasav Rav Nachman yesh chavata b'pachot me'asara. What you see from Rav Nachman is that he holds that you can get damaged from hitting the ground, even though the bar is less than 10 tfachim, right? Now, and you can die even. That this animal was going to die, according to Rav Nachman, which is why it's a treifa, even though it's less than 10 tfachim, which is a question, right? Because we haven't found that. So Eitvei Rav Rav Nachman, asked Rav Nachman, what about our Mishnah? Our Mishnah says, "How you pechutim me'asara tvachim nafal tochel shar chamar made patur." Right? If your bar that you dig is less than 10 tvachim, and a shar or chamar falls into it and dies, you're patur. Now, why are you patur? My time alav mishum nolat bechavata. It must be that the Mishnah is saying that if you can't be damaged by the physical damage, right, of a bar if it's less than 10 tvachim. So why are you saying that the shar that fell into the irrigation ditch is going to be a treifa? Answers Rav Nachman on the top of Amud Aleph. Amud Aleph, no, that's not the reason. It's not because you can get damaged. You can't get damaged less than 10 tvachim. It's because I hold like Rav. And the reason that a bar is chayv is because of the hevel, because of the fumes in the bar. And if it's not 10 tvachim, you don't have fumes. Nishum delet be havla. It's because there's no fumes in the bar, but there is chavata. Now, why aren't you chayv for chavata? The Torah doesn't require you. The Torah says it's not your fault that an animal fell into your pit, right? Only for the fumes. So you're not chayav for bar if it fell in, but the animal becomes a treifa because the animal could die. And therefore, if you shecht it right away, it might be pasul. Yachi says, if that's the case, that you're only chayav for the fumes, then huzakbo, it says im, right? Is the word? Sorry, ve'im huzakbo chayav, halat behavla. How could our Mishnah say that if you get damage in a bar that's less than 10 tvachim, but there's no hevel? Amalei, no, we said just before, ein hevel lemita v'yesh hevel l'nizakim. That a bar less than 10 does have these damaging fumes. They're just not damaging enough to kill an animal. They don't explain the death, but they would explain damage to an animal. Eitvei, what about from the following case that we had in Masechet Sanhedrin? If a person is chayiv skila, right? You're supposed to stone a person for doing all kinds of, not all kinds, but a few different very bad actions, like sleeping with nara marasa, chayiv skila. So how do you stone somebody? Says the Braita, it's actually a Mishnah, Beit HaSkila, the place where you would stone a person, it's actually a Braita, it was two heights of a person tall. So say a person is 6 feet, it was 12 feet tall. V'taniyala, now the Braita says about this Mishnah, v'koma shelo, and you have to take into account the person's height, right? Because you would drop them from full height. Harei kan shalosh. So you're throwing a person down the equivalent to 3 times their height, let's say 15 feet or 18 feet. Says Gemara, if that's the case, if you hold, like Rav Nachman says, that an animal that falls into a ditch can be a treifa, it means that you can be damaged by the earth even if it's not 10 tfachim. So why do you need to throw a person off from such a high height? Throw them off from a lower height. Why do you have to go, many, many amot tall, 6 amot tall? Why don't you do it less? Lamali kuli high. Why do you need such a high height to stone a person? Well, that's not a very good question, because obviously has nothing to do with this question of yesh chabata less than 10, because l'tamech, even according to everyone who says not like Rav Nachman, nevet asara, you only have to make it 10 tvachim. Everyone agrees that an animal will die if you throw it off 10 tvachim. So why do you need to have it much taller? Ella kirib Nachman. It goes like a different staying of Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman, Rabbi Baravua, Amar Kar, the Torah says, v'ahavta l'reach kamocha. Right? You should love a person like yourself, meaning if you're going to kill someone, kill them in a nice way. Baror lo mitayafa. You should kill them in a way that they're going to die fast, right? If you drop a person off too low of a height, then they'll get injured and they'll die slowly. Drop them off the top of the mountain, they'll die right away. So that's why you choose an extra tall height to stone a person from and drop them off. Yach, yes, so throw them off the Empire State Building, right? Nigbeh Tzvei, you should have them even higher, throw them from 50 feet tall. Mishum diminuval, that would be disgusting because they would splatter, right?
The word diminuval translates.
Muval means dirt. No, nuval means disgusting, but it'll be a nivel. It'll be gross because you'll see the person falling and causing really widespread, falling apart. Rashi says they will turn into limbs. They'll fall, scatter, exactly, splatter. So therefore, you don't want it to be too tall, but you don't want it to be too low, and that's just the right height to kill a person. Eitzveh. Asking, what about the following bright? We are 10 lines from the top of Daf Nun Aleph Amud Aleph. It says in the Torah, an important halacha, that if you own a house and you have a roof, you have to build a ma'aka. How do you translate ma'aka in English? Like a guardrail, right? You have to build like a rail around your roof. Why? It says that now we're quoting the pasuk. Ki yipol hanofel mimenu. Because you have to be careful to prevent someone from falling off of your roof. Says the Braita, we darshan that, mimenu velo bitocho. You don't have to worry about a person falling into your roof. What does that mean? Let's say you build your house right next to a highway. And from the public, from Reshut Rabim to your house is a drop of 10 feet. So you might think, wait a second, I have to be careful and put up a fence by the street so that no one falls from the street into my house. You don't. The makkah only has to come so that someone can't fall off your house into the street below, not from the street above into your house below.
Good to know.
Right? It's very important halacha, right? It's Ketzat, says the Braita. The Braita speaks it out for you, since you don't have Daf Yomi. Haita Reshut Rabim Gavo Mimenu Asarat Tfachim. If the Reshut Rabim, the street, is more than 10 Tfachim above your house level, v'nofel is the way it should say. They fall mitocha, from Reshut Rabim, litocho, into your house, patur. Then you don't have to, no, Rashi discusses, what do you mean patur? This is none of your business, right? This guy's jumping off the roof. I don't have to pay. So Rashi says patur means patur from making a ma'akeh, not patur from damages. You don't have to make a ma'akeh, but if your house is amukami meno asarat tfachim, if your house is 10 tfachim below the road, right? Sorry, did I do the opposite? No, the opposite. The road is 10 tfachim below your house, v'nafal mitocho, and the person falls from your roof, can fall from your roof of your house, litocha, into the Reshut Rabim, then you're chayav to make a makeh. Ask the Gemara, why 10 tfachim? If, according to Rav Nachman, a cow that falls into the Amat HaMayim, which is 6 tfachim, can die, why don't I have to build a makeh off my roof even if it's less than 10 tfachim? An animal or a person can get damaged from falling off the roof even if it's less than 10 tfachim. Why do you need to have a 10 tfachim in your house for you to be chayiv in a makeh? Why can't you be chayiv if it's less? Amrullah said, no. Shani bayit. It's a different rule. A makeh is only a responsibility on your house, right? If you have, as everyone points out, you have a ladder, you don't have to make a makeh around your ladder. The requirement of a makeh is that if you have a house, people think a house is a safe place. So they're not used to walking off the edge and being damaged, right? They think, anyway, whatever, it's a place for an habitation. So a house is different. And if you don't have 10 tfachim in your house, it's not a house. So if you have a little small structure that's 9 tfachim off the ground, that's not even considered a house, and you're not chayiv in a makeh, even though a person could fall off it and get damaged. That's why Yachi, if that's the case, why is 10 tfachim enough? Hashtanami dahavi me'avrei asara. From the outside of your house is 10 tfachim to the surface. But if outside of your house is 10 tfachim, the inside of your house can't be 10 tfachim because you have to have thickness of the roof, right? Dal minei tikra maziva. If you subtract from there the tikra, which means the tiles that you put on top of your roof, and maziva is the mortar that keeps it together. Migavai, from the inside, lo havi asara. So then you don't have 10 tfachim, and so you don't even have a house. Right, because you can't call it a house like with the sukkah, right? Unless it's 10 tefachim. That's why sukkah less than 10 tefachim is possible, right? So you need to have 10 tefachim for it to be a house. So how could it be exactly 10 tefachim to be chayav? You don't have 10 tefachim on the inside. I'm like, no, because you could dig out the ground. So it's 10 tefachim from the roof to the ground, but in your house you dig out a couple inches, and so you got 10 tefachim. I'm like, you dig out inside, so you have basically part of your house is underground. Well, if that's the case, then what if it's 5 tefachim tall and you dug out 5 tefachim below? right? Yachi kilo havi nami me'avrei asara. Even if it's less than 10 on the outside, you should be chayiv to make a ma'akeh, mishkachat la, the havi megavai asara. You can have 10 on the inside. You dug out even more. So according to Rav Nachman, you'd be chayiv for 6 tvachim. Why don't you have to make a ma'akeh for 6 tvachim? And you're going to say, oh, it's not a house. But what if you dug out your house 5 tvachim underground and you have 6 tvachim above ground? Then you have 11 tvachim. It's a house. And if a person falls off it, they can get damaged, or an animal. Ella says, well, you're right. The whole thing's a mistake. Hainu time under Rav Nachman. You know why Rav Nachman says, excuse me, Rav Nachman says that you're chayiv if your animal falls into the amatamayim, into the irrigation ditch, which is only 6 tvachim deep, because that is considered to be 10 tvachim. Why is it considered to be 10 tvachim? Because when you think about where an animal falls, you shouldn't think of an animal falling from their feet. Animals fall from their center of gravity. And so you've got to take into account that the actual distance that the animal fell is not just where the feet are. The body of that animal fell from where the animal sits. The average animal is how tall? 4 tvachim. So if you fall from standing, an animal's belly, which is what's going to get damaged, falls 10 tvachim. Perfect. Ella says, that's the reason that Rav Nachman said you're chayiv. Hainu time Rav Nachman savar nikrisa de Torah, from the belly of the shar, from the kres is the stomach. Torah is the cow. Le'ara, to the ground, kamma havi. How much space is that? Arba, right? That is 4 tvachim. Arita didalai kamma havi. How deep is the irrigation ditch that we're talking about? Shita, it's 6. So together, the animal fell ha'asara, right? The animal fell 10. Ishtakich, it turns out, when the animal fell, it fell 10 tvachim tall, and that's why I consider it to be a treifa, or a possible treifa, right? Now, it's obviously not a for sure treifa, and if the animal lives 24 hours, I would say it's not a treifa. But the fact that the owner rushed and shechted it right away, I have to say it's a suffix treifa, and it's puzzle. Okay? Ask the Gemara, well, if that's the case, so why in the world does our Mishnah say that a bar is 10 tvachim? If animals fall into a bar, it doesn't need to be 10 tvachim. If it's a cow, it could be 6 tvachim. If it's a human, it could be whatever a human is. If it's a chamar, it could be, you have to figure out for each animal, right? Ella matnitin diktani ma bar. Shu kedei lahamit asara tvachim. Afkol sheish bo kedei lahamit asara tvachim. You don't need 10 tvachim for a bar. Shita nami sagi. Why isn't 6 enough? Amri says the Gemara, well, it's not so simple, because not every animal falls from a standing position. What if it rolled over into the bar? So then its starting position was at ground level. And then you need 10 tvachim. Matnitan di ingad lebar. It's where it rolled into the bar. And so therefore it started off ground level. So you need 10 tvachim of fall in order to cause damage. Now, most understand that means not that, in fact, if an animal was standing and fell into a bar, you'd be chayiv for 6. It's that there's a rule. Once you have a rule, that's the rule. The rule is that you have to have the minimum amount, and the minimum amount is 10 tvachim. That's the way we generally paskin. Okay, that's the end of that Mishnah.
It sounds like it's treating all animals the same here, even though the model is an ox.
Right.
But
So
they're
I mean, that's
different animals.
so Charlie, that's
Yeah.
what the last one I just made, which some say is what the Rambam says, many say is what the Rambam says, is that even it's not that at the end of the day, it depends on the animal, right? A shar would be 4 tvachim tall, so you need 6 tvachim, and a chamar, which is a shorter animal, would be 3, and et cetera. It's that, basically, since the Torah defines one quality of a bar, it has to be one rule fits all. And since an animal could come in from ground level, it has to be a minimum of 10.
Yeah.
But
There are 3 animals in this room that can easily jump up and down 10 tefachim. They are 3 cats. Now that we would never the issue of whether they're treifa or not would never apply. But
correct. I mean, I think so, right. So the other obviously complicating issues, some of which we deal with and most of which we don't, is that, of course, there's different ways for an animal to fall, right? If an animal falls on its side, it can get damaged much more easily than it falls on its legs, right? Or whatever. Or if it's startled or not. So we're going to, discuss some of that. Actually, later today, I think if we get there, we'll talk about what if there's water in the bar, right? So is that good or bad? So in some ways, the Gemara is going to say later that it's bad because water brings more of the bad vibes, I would say, in the bar, right? But let's discuss that later when we get to it. Says the Mishnah today. We are at the Mishnah in the middle of Daf Nun Aleph Amud Aleph. Bar shel shnei shutfim. you have a bar that belongs to partners. So the Gemara is going to ask immediately, how does a bar belong to partners? Because we assume that a bar is an area that you dig in a Reshut Harabim, right? So nobody owns the Reshut Harabim. So what do you mean they're partners? Nobody owns the bar. How could two people own a bar? And the Gemara is going to go, remember, if you recall, that is the halacha. A bar has to be public, right? But it has to be a public space. The question was, what if you dug a bar? We're going to see this in the Gemara, and we're going to remind you of this in the Gemara, in your own Reshut, and then you were mafkir your Reshut.
Yeah.
So you dug the bar in your yard, and then you made your yard hefker so animals could come walk up to it. But you didn't make the bar hefker, right? So that was a debate before. So that might be the case of Shnei Shutfim. The Gemara will discuss it. But anyways, two people own this bar, okay? And Avar Alav Harishon, the first person walks by the bar and doesn't cover it. And so presumably we think that means, therefore, he's chayav for whatever happens next. But then, velo kisahu, v'asheni velo kisahu, and then the second one walks by and doesn't cover it, and then an animal falls into it and dies, hasheni chayav. The second one is chayav. The Gemara is going to say that doesn't make any sense, but Rosa thinks it does make sense.
It's like the hidden. It's the last person.
And we're going to have to get there tomorrow, really, to understand that. But before we get to that part of the Mishnah, says the Gemara, what do you mean? Amri, you say, bar shel shnei shutfim. How the heck do you have a bar owned by two people? Nobody owns a bar. It's a public thing, right? Two people dug the bar? Wait, what does that mean? So says well, Hanicha Isfir Lan Rabbi Akiva. Remember, Rabbi Akiva's opinion earlier was the Amar bar birshuto chayev. If you have a bar in your own reshut, you are chayev. Now, ask the Gemara, how did you find that? Right? How can you have a bar in your own reshut? Because remember, if it's your own house, an animal walks in, you're patur. Because what were they doing in your house? So mishkach could be b'chatzar shel shnehem. Two people bought a house together, right? Two brothers bought a house together, and v'bar shel shnehem, and they both have a pit inside their yard. They have water there. They have storage there. V'hifkiro reshutan. They make their reshut hefker. They no longer want to pay taxes on this reshut. They no longer want to care about it. They say this belongs to anybody. It's free, so it's public. But the lo hifkiron baron. But they didn't make their bar hefker. So then it's a bar. According to Rabbi Akiva, you're still chayiv if an animal falls into it, even though it's privately owned, and it's owned by two people. So that's great. If you're of the opinion, like we think Rabbi Yishmael said earlier, that a bar that's in your own reshut, you're always patur. So then how could two people own something that has to be hefker? Answers the Gemara. Right, the only place you can be chayav on a bar is if it's in public. How could two people own something in a place where nobody owns anything? Says the Gemara, well, you know what the case must be? Where two people went to a third person and said, we'll pay you $20 if you dig a pit for us in Reshut Rabim. So we really want a pit. We know it's public. We don't care. Dig a pit for us in Reshut Rabim. We'll pay you $20. And the shliach goes and does it for both of them. So then the shliach did it for two people. So then maybe that's a case. What do you think?
No.
Ask the Gemara, eat the shavu shliach tervayo. Two people made a man a shliach. And they said to him, Zil karilon, go dig a bar for us. V'azov v'karlo. And he did it for them. They wouldn't be the owners because ein shliach l'dvar avera. You can't make someone a shliach to go and do an avera for you. You can't say to the guy, go and kill someone for me and not, be chayav. He did it. He dekara hay chamisha. Now, excuse me, the case that probably you would have thought of first, which is one guy dug 5 tvachim and another guy came and dug 5 tvachim. That's very complicated, right? Because then, where am I? Then nistalkula maseh rishon. Then don't you say that the first person's action went away? Why? Rebbe. It would make sense according to Rebbe. Now, we had never heard of Rebbe before, but in 5 lines, we're going to hear about this Rebbe. But according to Rebbe's opinion, that says that if two people dig a bar, I dig 5 tvachim, the next person digs another 5 tvachim, and an animal falls in and gets damaged, that we share the responsibility for that damage. So that makes sense. The Rebbe Ulin is zakim mishkachatla for damage. El the Rebbe lamita. Rebbe's going to say in a minute that if an animal dies, it's not an equal responsibility. It's the last guy who's responsible. And according to the Rabbanan, who say that it's the last guy no matter what happens, bein lamita, bein lenizakim, and it's only the last one who's responsible. So hechi mishkachatla. So we're back to our original question. How do you ever have a bar that belongs to partners? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, you know how bar can belong to two people? There was a bar that was 8 tvachim deep, and on the bottom of the bar was a big stone. And one guy couldn't move it. So two people came together and moved the stone. So they did it together. They needed both people's effort to do it. It's not extra. And therefore they together made this into a bar. They don't own it, quote unquote. No one owns the Reshut Rabim, but they own responsibility. So Kegon, where am I? The two of them moved a big stone at one time, and that made the bar 10 tefachim deep. So that's how you could have a case where two people dug a bar at the exact same time together. Okay, so that is the case of our mission.
In a similar case in Hilchot Shabbat, the two people, it's a store, but they'd both be patur from a korban. Because it's
so
two
Shabbat's
people
a little
doing
different. Correct. In Shabbat, you have to do an action all on your own to be chayiv. Continues the Gemara. What is this case of Rebbe and the Rabbanan that you were just referencing? My Rebbe, my Rabbanan. Right? Ask the Gemara. We are 15 lines from the bottom. Titania. As the Braita says, Echad hachofer bar tisha, whether a person digs 9 tefachim deep in a bar, uba acher v'hishlima la'asara. Right? Not whether. If one person comes and digs a bar 9 tefachim, and a second person comes and digs the last tefach, then says the Braita, hacharon chayav. The last guy is chayav. This is what Rose is comfortable with. The last person made it into a bar, and therefore anything that happens from that bar is due to the responsibility of the last person. Rebbe says not so simple. Achar acharon lemita. The last person is chayav if an animal falls into it and dies, because he made it 10 tefachim. V'achar shnehem lenizakim. But you go after both of them have responsibility for this bar in regards to damage, because as we've seen many times, a bar can obviously cause damage if it's less than 10 tefachim. It just can't cause death, right? And so the damages, even though it and then ended up becoming 10 tefachim, the damages are the responsibility of both. Ask the Gemara, my time under Rabbanan. What's the rationale for the Rabbanan that only one person can be chayav for the actions of a bar? The Amar Krak is a pasuk says, ki yifateh, which means miftach, if you open up a space, and then it says v'chi yichra, if you dig. So isn't that repetitive? Why does it have to talk about a bar in two different ways? Imal p'ticha chayav, if you're chayav for opening up a space, meaning revealing a pre-existing bar that was covered, you uncover it and people fall into it, you're chayav, or animals, I should say. So al kriyalo kol shekain. Certainly, if you made the bar, you should be chayav, right? You did the whole action. Ella, the Torah is telling you, lahavi, it's telling you, korah achar korah, that if one person digs it and then another person digs it, shesilek maaser rishon. That's exactly the point. Only one person can dig a bar. And obviously, if one person digs half a hole and the other person finishes it off, only the second person is considered to be chayiv. It's never a two-man job or two-woman job. Okay? Rebbe says, what are you talking about? Rebbe Amar, Lecha, sorry. Apologize, everyone. Rebbe will say to you, Hanu mitzvah tzrichi. In fact, you need both psukim for a different reason. As we said before, now Rashi, we don't say now why we said them before, but if you go before, we talked about different kinds of borot and why these would be necessary, right? We had this in yesterday's daf. Rabbanan, that's where, well, it's true, because we talked all about this yesterday. You need the two psukim. So Rabbanan nami mitzvah tzrichi. You're right. Rabbanan, they were joking. Elahayna time of Rabbanan, because Amar Kra ki yichra ish bar. Why does it ish bar, right? Is it because a man? What if a woman digs a bar? You're obviously chayav, right? For nezek, unlike mitzvah, for nezek, there's no difference between a man and a woman. We hold them responsible. So why does it say ish bar? To tell you, ish, an individual, echad v'lo shnayim. Bar is a single person responsibility. Now, of course, this is strange because our Mishnah is talking about shutfim who have a bar, right? But nonetheless, digging a bar is a one-person thing, not a two-person thing. Rebbe says, 1 second. I use the pasuk b'chiyichra ish bar to tell you a very important halacha that we had 10 times already. Hainu mibayle kiyichra ish bar the lo shor bar. Remember, if your cow digs a hole in the ground, you're not chayav for it. Only if you dig the hole in the ground. So that's why you need ish. Rabbanan, you're right, you need it for that. But trey ish ktivi. It says the word ish twice, right? Trey ish bar ktivi. Sorry, it says ish bar, right? It says kiyichra ish bar and ki. What's the first one? When yiftach ishbar, thank you. Right? It says ki yiftach. The Rebbe says 1 second. You can't darshan the second one. Because once you say ishbar by one, you got to say it by the other. It's got to keep symmetry. Everyone knows that from literature. Hi, I did the kasav, hi, kasav nami, hi. Right? Since it says it by one, it has to say it by the other. It says, okay, well, even according to the Chachamim, that ki yichre ish bar means that only one person who digs the bar is chayav, how do you know it's the second one who's chayav? First one dug 9 tefachim. Why isn't he chayav? He did the majority. Umimai dilechiyuve batra. How do you know that's to be chayav? The second guy, dilechiyuve Kamma. Maybe the first one should be chayav. Well, lo salkadaitach. That's not logical. Because the Torah says the hamet yelo. Remember, you have to pay, right? Balabar yishalem, and you get to keep the dead body. So clearly, the only one that caused it to die is the second one who made it 10 tefachim. And so therefore, since we're associating the mate with the bar, it must be the second one. As Gemara, we knew that pasuk for everything else. But Ahudaka Mita, the one who caused death. We use the pasuk Hameti Elo for Rava. Remember that Rava said, we had this a couple times already. Damar Rava, if you have a sharp Sulei Miktashim, if you have a cow, let's say a Bechor, they got a mum, that's owned by the Kohen. Remember, that's a shar that belongs partly to Hekdesh, and you can't just do whatever you want with the carcass of that animal. You're allowed to shecht it and eat it. But if it dies, you can't cut it up and feed it to your cows or your dogs, maybe, right? You're not allowed to get benefit from it that way. So if you have a sharp sulam muktashim, shenafal the bar, patur, you don't have to pay. Shenemer hamet yelo, that the mate goes to the owner of the bar, and since you're not allowed to give this mate to the owner of the bar, you don't have to pay. The misha hamet shalo. So that's the pasuk of hamet yelo needs to tell you something else. Not that the one who dug it is chayav, but that you don't have to give a shar that's usher to give when it's dead does not require payment in a bar. Amri, say the chachamim, it's true. You need the pasuk for that. But you see it from the grammar of the pasuk. You see that you're talking about the person who caused death. And therefore, according to the chachamim, unlike Rebbe, when the Torah says, Ki yichre bar, it's only one individual is chayav for digging a bar if you dig it sequentially, and the one who's chayav is the last one. Okay? Now that seems pretty clear. Everyone's got that straight. What if, though, I got a bigger question. What if the first person digs 10 tefachim, so it's a bona fide bar, and another person comes along and digs another 10 tefachim? So who's chayav then? The first one or the second one, right? Because they both dug enough for it to be chayav. Says the Braita now, Tanu Rabbanan, Echad chofer bar asara. One person comes along and digs a bar that's 10 tefachim. Uba acher v'shlimo le'esrim. The second guy comes and digs another 10 tefachim. So now you have a 20 tefach deep bar. Uba acher, third guy says, I can get in on this too. V'shlimo le'shloshim. He digs another 10 tefachim. Kulan chayavim. If an animal falls into that bar, they're all chayav because each of them independently dug the bar enough to kill an animal. Ask them ever, but what about the following Braita? The Braita says, Echad chofer bar asara. One guy digs a bar that's 10 tefachim, and ba acher v'siyed v'kiyed. Another person comes and they do plaster and decoration all around the bar. Now the Gemara assumes that when you plaster the sides of a bar, you make it more damaging. Now that might be partly because it's hard, but that's not the main reason. The main reason is because the air in the bar can't escape, right? And so unlike a natural bar where there's more airflow, once you put plaster on the walls, there's less airflow, and therefore there are more fumes in that bar.
Okay.
Says the Braita, Hacharon chayav. Only the last one is chayav. Why is only the last one chayav? The first person dug a bar that can kill an animal. So why would you say in one case that everyone's chayav, in one case you're saying only the Acharon? Ask the Gemara, turn the daf to daf, nun aleph on the bet. Lema, hi Rebbe, hi Rabbanan. Maybe this is in fact two Braitot. One is going according to Rebbe, and one is going according to the Rabbanan. What did Rebbe say? Rebbe said that when two people dig a bar, they're chayav for damage together. So the Rebbe would hold if two people dug a bar that was deep enough to kill, they'd chayav for death together. Yeah. And the Rabbanan say there's no such thing as two people. Only one person is chayav for every bar. So maybe that's the case. The machloket. Amar Rav Zvi, the top line. No. We don't love to do that because we don't want a Braita to do it that way. Ha v'ha Rabbanan. In fact, both Braitot are going to Rabbanan, who say that if one person digs 9 and one person makes it 10, only the person who did 10 is chayav, not the 9s, right? But ad kan look Amir Rabbanan achron chayav ela heichad lo avid kama shir mita. That's only because the first person only did 9 tefachim, so it was not enough space to kill an animal, and therefore he did nothing. So the second one is chayav alone. Aval heichad avid kama shir mita. When the first person did a 10 tefach bar, and the second person came along and did a 10 tefach bar as well, Afilo Rabbanan modu tikulun chayavin. Rabbanan would admit that everybody is chayav. What about the second Braita, which said that one person dug a 10 tefach bar and another person came and plastered up the walls? Why is only the second person chayav? Hasayid v'kayid. What about the case where someone plastered up the walls? The Kamma shir mita. The first person dug a 10 tefach bar, so he's chayav to kill the animal. It's possible to kill the animal. The katani acharon chayav. We said only the last one is chayav. Amri, there the case was hatam shlo hayabo hevel mita. You know what? It was a bar that was so wide. Remember, I told you this halacha that if the bar is wider than it's deeper, then we don't consider it to have hevel to kill an animal. And if an animal dies in that bar, you're not chayiv unless you're according to Shmuel and it dies from falling and hitting the ground, right? But let's say you had pads on the ground, so it didn't fall. It didn't die from the fall. It sat in that bar and it died. If the bar is wider than it is tall, so say it's 10 tefachim deep but 15 tefachim wide, you're not chayiv. So the first guy dug a bar that was 12 by 10. The second guy came and filled in the wall so that it made it narrower, and now there's bad air in the bar. So it's only the second one that made it something that could kill an animal, right? So read that inside. Hatam shlo hayabo hevel mita. There was not enough space for there to be the fumes that would kill the animal. Uba acher v'hosif ba hevel mita. The second guy came and added fumes that would kill the animal. Igadamina, some learn the exact opposite. Some learn that in fact it's going according to Rebbe. Ikada Amri, sorry, we are 10 lines from the top, maybe 8. Amar Rav Zvid, Hava Rebbe. Rav Zvid, in fact, said that both Brighton are going according to Rebbe, who says that if one person digs 9 and one person does 10, they're chayiv together for damage, right? So the first Brighton makes a ton of sense. Person number 1 dug a 10 tefachim, which would kill an animal. Person number 2 dug 10. Person number 3, 10. They're all chayiv, just like with damages, right? But the last case, which says only the last person is chayav, in fact, initially the bar would not have hurt an animal or killed an animal. And another person came and he dug space. He plastered it to increase the space around the walls to decrease the opening of the bar, and therefore added all the bad fumes, and that's why the animal died. Amar Rava. Says Rava, I have an interesting question. Haniach even al piha bar v'shlimo la'asara. Let's say you have a bar that's 9 tefachim deep, and you dig up 1 tefach around the top of the bar. Now you dig up, sorry. You put a stone, right? You build up. So you put a stone around the top, so then now the height from the ground to the bar is more than 10 tefachim. But not because you added to the bottom, but because you added to the top. Right, you put a stone, haniach even al pi habar, next to the top of the bar, the shlimo la'asara, and that made it into 10 tefachim. So that is banu l'achloket Rabbi Rabbanan. That's the same thing as Rabbi Rabbanan. We talked about a case where you dug 9, then you added a 10th. Here too, you had a 9 bar, you added a 10th. This is my pshita. That's obvious. Anyone who's 2 years old would know that. No, because you would have thought ma'odetema l'matahu dehavla didei kakatale. The air gets worse as you go down. So if one person digs 9 and the other person digs 10, the problem is the 10th. So maybe that's the only person who shares responsibility, right? Because the 9 person dug most of it. The 10th person dug a little bit more, but it's a critical part. But if you add a tefach on top, that's the good air now. You didn't make the problem. It's not your bad air that's killing it because the animal fell to the bottom. There's no difference. You made the bar, you made the bar. Boy, Rava. Now, Rava asked another great question, right? What if you were tam tefach v'silek avanav? What if you had a bar that was 9 tefachim, okay? Another person came and made it 10 tefachim by adding stones on top. And then someone came to you and said, wait a second, you better be careful. A shar might walk there and fall in. So what do? You take away your stones. What'd you leave behind? The thing that had been dug before you ever showed up. Are you putter now? Did you undo your bar? What if an animal falls in there and gets injured? Says the case, right? Tam tefach, and then you see like avanav mao. Mi amrinan, well, you're absolved of any responsibility because my da'avid shakli, whatever you did, you took away. Odilma, do you say no? When you made this into a bar that was 10, you took full responsibility for the bar. And nistalku maaseh rishon v'kamalei kulei b'rshutei. This is your problem, buddy. And if you don't solve it, even taking out the 10th one, it's still 9 tefach problem. Teiko. We don't know the resolution to that question. Amar Rabba, we're going to do one more, and then I think we'll stop a little early. Amar Rabba bar Brachana. Actually, we'll keep going. Amar Rabba bar Chana, Amar Shmuel bar Mirta, bar Shmona. If you have a bar that's 8 tefachim deep, right? Now remember, 8 tefachim cannot kill an animal, usually. But umehen shnei tefachim maya. 2 of the 8 tefach are full with water. So you have 8 tefachim deep, 2 tefachim of water, 6 tefachim of empty space. Says Rabba bar Brachana, Amar Shmuel bar Mirta, chayav. Then you're chayav for that bar. Why? Because the animal dies in that space. My time, huh? Called tefach demaya ketredi yabashadami. A tefach of water is like 2 of dry land because of bad air, presumably, right? Ibayla. Ask the Gemara, well, is that principle apply universally? What if it's 9? Bar tisha umehem tefach acher echad mayim. You have a 9 tefach bar with 1 tefach of water. Is that 10? Mao. Mi amrina kiven delona fishi. Mi amrina. Do you say kiven delona fishi maya let behavla? But you know it's only a little bit of water. It doesn't cause a lot of bad air. Odilma given the amik tvei it's behavla. The deep, a 9 tefach deep makes it more fumy. What if it's bar shiva behen shlosha tefachim mayim? If it's 7 tefachim deep and 3 tefachim of water, can 3 tefachim of water make it a big bar? Make it a 10 tefach bar? Mi amrina given the fishi maya tvei it's behavla. You say, oh, there's a lot of water, so there's a lot of bad fumes. Odilma kiven del amka let lehavla. It's not really deep enough. Teiko, we don't really know the answer for these questions.
Okay, so we did.
Well, we don't have a lot of cases where animals fall into bars, but yes, take it.
Mm.
Bo'amine Rav Shizbi mi Rabba. Rav Shizbi asked Rabba, maybe we'll try to get to the 2 dots, if that's okay with everyone. Said Rav Shizbi to Rabba, what if, remember I told you the principle before, everyone should know this principle. If a bar is as wide as it has to be, if it's wider than it's deep, then you don't consider it to be bad air in the bar. Okay? It's only if it's narrower than it's deep. What if I dig a bar 10 tefachim deep, 4 tefachim wide? So it's a bad bar, let's say. But somebody comes along and they make it bigger. And they make it 8 tefachim. Okay? Let's just say. We're going to see the case in a second, but I'm picking random cases. Okay? So let's read it inside. Where am I? Right? It's a bar, say 5 tefachim wide. I picked that case and deep. Another person makes the bar 8 tefachim wide. So do you say Amrle, and then the animal falls into it and dies? So what do you say? Mahu Amrle hare miyad havla. You could say, wait, I made the bar better because I, by enlarging it, made there to be less bad fumes inside the bar. Not enough. The animal still died. But I at least was helping out. I wasn't hurting. He said, no way, Adarabba. Hare kirev hezekah. But you made it more likely an animal would fall into it. Why? Because if it's got an 8 tefach opening, there's a lot more space to fall into the bar than if it has a 5 tefach opening. So you made it a bigger hazard by enlarging the bar. Good question, right? El Amar of Ashi Nichzianan. You know what? We just have to see the circumstance. If the animal fell in and died by sort of choking in the fumes, then you look at this guy and say you're putter because he didn't make the fumes worse. He made the fumes better. But if the animal fell down and broke its leg and died, then you blame the second guy because he made it more likely for an animal to fall into the bar. Then you made the bar more likely to cause damage because you made it bigger. Some said it the other way. Rav said, look, where did the animal fall into the bar from? If it fell into the side that I built, that I enlarged, then it's my fault. My enlargement of the bar made it more likely this animal would fall in. But if it fell from the other side anyways, then I actually was helping by making it less fumy inside the bar. Itmar, one final question for today. What if you have, this is the question everyone's been wondering about, if a bar is wider than it's deep, then there's no bad air, right? According to Rav, if an animal falls into that bar, you're putter no matter what. According to Shmuel, you'd still be chayav because if it breaks its limb on the ground, you have to pay for what's called chavata. But what if you put padding on the ground? You'd be putter. That is if it's wider than it's deep. If it's narrower than it's deep, you're chayav, right? What if it's exactly the same? Right? $1 million question. Itmar. Bar she'omko kirachva. You have a pit whose width is the same as its depth. or the opposite. Its depth is the same as its width. So Rabbi Rav Yosef Damar Chervayo Shmei Rabbi Bar Chana Damar Mishmei Rebbe money. Sorry, Chad Amar LaOlam Yishba Hevel Achi Rachva Yoter Amka. Someone said it's a problem. It's 50-50 is bad. It's got to be wider than it is deeper. Chad Amar LaOlam Ein Ba Hevel Achi Amka Yoter Rachva. Nope. If 50-50 is okay, and that seems to be the way you paskin. I'm not sure why. And so you should just know that for your bar. It has to be deeper than it is wide in order to be chayiv. If it's a 50-50 or more width to depth, well, not 50-50, 100 to 100, then you would be patur. We'll stop there. We'll pick it up tomorrow at the 2 dots. Apologize, I'm a little under the weather. I hope you're feeling better tomorrow. We're learning tomorrow morning is okay with everyone, 7:45 a.m.? Okay.
Yeah, I can do that. I can't do tomorrow night.
What we're going to do tomorrow morning. It's Nittelnacht.
Yeah, tomorrow morning's good.
Tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning, 7:45
7:45?
at the 2 dots.
Great.
Okay.
Great.
Shavua Tov, everyone.
Yasher
Thank
Koth,
you.
get well.
Thank you.
Shavua Tov.